Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin, check. You already know. Let's go. Golden Bluted is a college football YouTube channel for entertainment. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into our next college football video. Well, we have some actual news whenever it comes to conference realignment, not just speculation, but you know, I'm going to sprinkle in some speculation, but there's some actual news to start this off. So the news is, well, first off, the Regents approved the UCLA exit to the Big Ten, so they will be moving on to the Big Ten just like we thought they were going to. That was the last hurdle. I didn't see any issues with that, but it was news there for a while. It was approved. UCLA will join USC going to the Big Ten. The other news to talk about is Oklahoma and Texas negotiate with the Big 12 for an early exit fee. It's looking like Oklahoma and Texas will be in the SEC as soon as 2024. And part of those negotiations are some out-of-conference games in Big 12 stadiums for Texas and Oklahoma for those remaining years that they were supposed to be in the Big 12. I think this is a win for Texas and Oklahoma. And I also think this is a win for the Big 12. Remember, the Big 12 will collect a lot of money off of Texas and Oklahoma for this early exit fee into the SEC. So this is a win-win situation. And I think this is setting up for some major conference realignment in the future. This is the building blocks. This is the foundation. And I think the two conferences that are in the crosshairs as far as falling, being in big time trouble, is the ACC and the Pac-12. I do think eventually there will be 3 mega conferences. I think the Big Ten and the SEC will get their picks first, and the Big 12, who I think survives because of Brett Yormark. That hire is what will save the Big 12. Because of Brett Yormark, will be that 3rd mega conference that remains. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, you know, the Big Ten and the SEC, they're going to stop at 16 or they're going to stop at 20. They don't want to go on beyond that. They're going to have their own playoffs and do their own thing and be separate from everybody else. Well, they can try that, but we've seen precedent in the past that whenever you do that, people aren't going to show as much interest. People like parity. People like as much drama involved as possible. So they're going to have to add more teams and include another conference if they want to keep bringing in that big money. People aren't going to be satisfied with just 40 teams playing each other for a national championship. That's not going to cut the mustard. They might try that. I'm not saying they won't try that. They might try that. But I think eventually they'll be like, well, we need to add some more members. And we need to include this other conference. That way people will be interested. At least more people will be interested. You have to include more regions of the country to get all those eyeballs. It's as simple as that. So this is the end result. This isn't the in-between where they might try the 40 teams and do their own thing. This is the end result that I think could happen. And I'm trying to follow the rules as far as Big Ten liking the AAU status and the SEC trying to stay as southeastern as possible. I'm trying to follow those rules whenever it comes to this conference realignment scenario to make this as doable as possible. I think this could happen in rounds. Well, it's already happening in rounds. So round 1, the Big Ten went out and got USC and UCLA, the biggest brands in the Pac-12, the biggest money makers in the Pac-12, and they will get an equal revenue share, same as everybody else in the Big Ten. I think moving forward, when you go to rounds 2 and 3, that's when you get to a lesser share, but still a significant amount. Same thing with the SEC. Round 1 was Texas and Oklahoma. If you're not counting 2010, 2011, a decade ago conference realignment, and the early ACC conference realignment. We're not counting those as rounds. We're counting what's happening currently. So that was round 1 for the SEC and the Big Ten. Round 2. Keeping in mind AAU status is a must for the Big Ten and trying to stay in the southeastern region as much as possible for the SEC as being a part of these rules. So round 2 for the Big Ten, I think they could go after Georgia Tech, Virginia, North Carolina, and Duke. So they're going to go to the East this time. I think this would be a smart deal because most of the people that watch college football are in the eastern part of the United States. So you want to capture as much of that demographic as possible. And plus you're adding major basketball brands in North Carolina and Duke, not just football. So I think this is a great win for the Big Ten. You gain a new footprint in the state of Virginia with Virginia. You gain a new footprint in the state of Georgia with Georgia Tech. And then, of course, North Carolina and Duke gets you that footprint in the state of North Carolina. So now we go to round 2 in the SEC. And this could be either or. Maybe the Big Ten gets those 4 teams first, or maybe the SEC gets these 4 teams first. And I think the SEC will go after Clemson and Florida State first and foremost. Big time money makers. They check every box when it comes to the SEC. Those will be the next 2 teams that the SEC will get. And I'm very, very confident that those 8 teams needed to vote to dissolve the granted rights of the ACC and dissolve the ACC, do exist, including Notre Dame. Remember, Notre Dame does have a nuke vote when it comes to the ACC. I truly believe that those 8 teams exist, and that's based on that. The granted rights go away. The SEC goes after some ACC teams. But along with Clemson and Florida State, I also think that the SEC in round 2 could go after NC State and West Virginia. So even though North Carolina and Duke go to the Big Ten and gives them a North Carolina footprint, the SEC can counter by getting NC State and grab them a footprint in the state of North Carolina. To go along with NC State, West Virginia. West Virginia has been in the conversation of the SEC since way back when they added Missouri and Texas A&M. It came down to Texas A&M and either Missouri or West Virginia. That came down to an ESPN vote, and ESPN said, you got to get Missouri, and that's what they did. But West Virginia has been in the conversation before, and that's why I think they'll be in round 2 for the SEC, along with Clemson, Florida State, and NC State. Moving on to round 3, I think this is where the Big Ten goes back out west. This is when they finally add Washington and Oregon out of the Pac-12, the biggest brands remaining, and they also get Colorado. Remember that hire Deion Sanders? They're already making a ton more money just in the first week of his hiring. I think that continues, and I think Colorado joining the Big Ten could mean a long tenure for Deion Sanders at Colorado as long as he has success. And then Kansas. Kansas is a big-time moneymaker in basketball, and they're investing a ton of money into their football. They are finally showing that they care about football, and it will pay off. And yes, all these teams have AAU status, and I think that solidifies the Big Ten. Now, those last 4 teams, I think they'll get a partial share, partial revenue share. Not as much as everybody else, but still enough money to get them out of the Pac-12. And in Kansas' situation, the Big 12. Could be the same scenario for round 2 as well. Could be a partial revenue share for Georgia Tech, Virginia, North Carolina, and Duke. But definitely for round 3. Same thing for the SEC. I think Clemson and Florida State will get full revenue share, but West Virginia and NC State might have to settle for partial revenue share. And then round 3, same thing, partial revenue share. And I think in round 3, the SEC gets Miami Hurricanes, Virginia Tech, Oklahoma State, and Louisville. So they pretty much wrap up the state of Florida with that Miami pick. They have Florida State, Florida, and Miami. The only team out of the state of Florida that they wouldn't have is UCF. They would still be in the Big 12. Virginia Tech gets them a new footprint in the state of Virginia. And then Oklahoma State wraps up the state of Oklahoma for the SEC. And of course, Louisville wraps up the state of Kentucky for the SEC. And we're staying in the southeastern part of the United States. But I think all 4 of those teams would have to accept a partial revenue share for this to work. So that leaves our 3rd mega conference. The remainders of the Big 12, BYU, UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor. Also adding Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, Washington State, Oregon State from the Pac-12. Remember, the only one out of the 4 corners that I don't have going to the Big 12 would be Colorado. I still have Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah going. And then along with them, Washington State and Oregon State. Then they turn their eyes eastward, and they pick up Syracuse, Wake Forest, Boston College, and Pitt, the leftovers from a defunct ACC. And then to get to 24, they're going to have to add the highest brands from the group of 5. And I know their new TV deal states that they're not guaranteed any revenue bump if they add any group of 5 teams. But I think if they're included in the split off in the new playoff system, that could change as well. So the teams that I think they could add out of the group of 5, first 4 most definitely would be Memphis, Boise State, San Diego State, SMU. I think those are the 4 most valuable group of 5 brands remaining as far as what the Big 12 could pick up. And I know Fresno State could be argued there. Then finally, the last round of the new Big 12 would be East Carolina and either Tulane, Tulsa, or Fresno State. One of those 3 teams. I think that would solidify the new Big 12. And oh yeah, Stanford and Cal will go independent in this scenario along with Notre Dame. Notre Dame gets included with this split off. Not sure about Stanford and Cal. And I think the biggest piece of news that could set off this domino effect is Texas and Oklahoma agreeing with the Big 12 for an early exit for 2024. Y'all let me know in the comments section. Do you think the Big Ten and the SEC do try to stop at 40 altogether and split off and see if that works first? And the next thing is, do you think they fail at that like I think they will? So they're forced to add more members and include a 3rd mega conference to make the money that they thought they were going to make in the first place. That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.